Welcome back to the Bayside Fabrication YouTube channel. Today, we're gonna start playing with this little guy here. So I was kind of chasing my tail a little bit in this valve cover, as you guys have seen, and I decided that I need an order of operations in order to just keep this thing moving at a pace that we've been going at and not getting stagnant. I feel like the valve cover, I went back and, so far I've chopped up 4 valve covers at this point, just because I'm being OCD about it. So I need to move on past this. This valve cover is done, ready for blast and powder coat, but for now it's installed. And what I decided, what I decided that we're gonna do is work from the hot side to the cold side. So we're gonna start off building the turbo manifold, mounting the turbo, building the intercooler, mounting the intercooler. From there, we're gonna go back up to our intake. We still have to mount our throttle body. And then we will go fuel system and then electrical. So at this point, I'm at the stage where it's time to get this turbo mounted. Now, I have a flange on here already, and we'll crawl under and kind of figure out the best placement for the turbo. Now, to build the actual turbo kit, I'm actually going to pull the motor back out because it's going to be way easier, I believe, to tack and get everything done with the motor back out. So it's only 2 bolts to get this motor out. It's not a big deal. So let's start. All right, guys, so what I'm doing here is just using the jack just so I don't fatigue myself. But we're coming up with a plan here on where to mount this turbo. Now, a couple things to consider is I have to be higher than the oil pan here for our oil pan drain. But I also want to keep the turbo as low as possible, just to keep the weight as low as possible on this whole setup. So now I'm considering which way to do it. We could kind of angle it like this. More than likely our intercooler is going to be in the back here. So it would be nice to be able to kind of do something like that. Maybe mount it this way. But then our exhaust is going to be an issue. So let me play around with this for a few minutes. As you guys can see, it's kind of tricky. So we just tacked our flange into pretty much open space here. And now we're going to take our turbo and just see how close we are. Now I just used a little piece of 1/4-inch rod here so we can bend this and move this really anywhere we want, but this gives us a rough idea of where we're gonna live. So that's where it's at now. I actually think it can go up. A little bit more. Before we pull this engine and transaxle back out, I want to put my rear bumper back on and figure out where our intercooler is going to go. Stock on the turbos, they went up in here, but I don't really see much airflow up in this rear bumper area. So I'm thinking maybe doing one across this whole rear bumper here. But we're just going to kind of make a mental note of where this discharge is going to go. And we're going to have to toss a 90 on it for sure. And our intercooler pipe will come down and come somewhere around here is where I'm thinking the intercooler will start. So I'm going to look at a few intercooler options online, a few intercooler cores, and see what size intercooler core is going to work in this area. Well, it took me about, I don't know, half an hour, and I got the motor out, and we now have our flange in outer space here. And now we're just going to kind of verify kind of the fitment of things and where it's going to go. We are doing a twin scroll exhaust housing. So with that being said, we need to focus the pulses into different parts of the exhaust manifold. So these two are going to have to go to one side, and these two are going to have to go to the other side. So the manifold is going to kind of probably have to it'll probably wind up looking a little bit funky, but it'll be cool. And we just keep it divided all the way. So if you're not familiar with twin scroll setups, this whole turbine housing is divided, and the pulses from the cylinders hit different parts of the exhaust turbine, and it helps with turbo lag and things like that. So I mean, you can go down a rabbit hole on YouTube and check out all sorts of videos on twin scroll versus single and blah blah blah. But this is a T4 twin scroll setup, which we're doing. So we need to build a proper twin scroll manifold, and that's what we're about to do. All right, guys, here's our arsenal of bends. As you can see, we got plenty of 90s, which we can make into 45s. We have almost no straight pieces, which is unfortunately like the first thing we need to do. So the first thing I need to do is build a collector, a divided collector on this flange. So I'm kind of in a weird spot. So I think I might just start with the manifold at the flange here and start there until my straight pieces come in. Well, here's where we're at, guys. I had a little change of plans here with our plate that was just floating in air. That's where approximately we wanted the turbo. However, I had 3.5 inches this way before there was any interference. And I was looking at the distance from my exhaust to my oil filter, and it was like pretty much going to be brushing up against it, which I don't want. So essentially what I did was just took the turbo and just popped it out just like 1 inch and then kicked it in. So right here we have our inlet, which actually has a nice little area right next to the transaxle for a filter. And now our exhaust can kind of come up and away, and then it's going to come out here. Well, here's our final result, guys. I have our collector all ready to weld or tack on and place on there and start our runners. So I'm letting my collector cool off a little bit. Now what I think I'm going to do is actually cut a little bevel just on the, where it meets the plate here. So they sit just slightly kicked out like that, away from each other. All right, this is how we have her set up now. And just so you guys know, from my flange to the coolant line is 10.25. So I'm trying to keep it at 9 inches here. So that's kind of my goal, is to keep it at 9, and that's exactly where we're at. And now we're just kind of leveling things off. And how I shimmed it is just got some pipe in here and a little piece of wood and nothing very fancy. All right, guys, so what I'm doing is using a smaller diameter tube. That way I can kind of get an idea for some of the straights, so I'm not just, you know, building it in thin air. Now I've made a couple of manifolds before, but I've never made a twin scroll or anything like that. And the goal is to make these as equal length as possible. Now it's going to be a little tricky. I'm not going to beat my head against the wall about, you know, making them exactly like to the, you know, T equal length, but I'm going to do the best I can. And that will give us the most efficient spool on the turbo. So in conjunction with the divided turbine housing. We've got one runner done here and calling it quits for the night, but it's just tacked in place. So now the next runner we're going to do on this guy, goes to here, and then we're just going to kind of try to figure everything out. Just a little progress report here of our octopus. Everything's going well. The real trick is going to be how to separate this so I can weld these pieces all up 360, where they get to create like this one in here would be impossible to weld. So once I kind of have everything in here, I got to figure out where to cut these all to pull them out, weld them up, and then be able to finish welding them back onto the manifold. So we'll figure that out when we get there, but so far, man, this is looking pretty wild. So as you can see, the ports here are ovaled, so this is just something I want to show you guys that I'm doing here. So what I do is just throw the tube in the vise and just give it a nice little crunch on the edge of the tube. Obviously the other side is round. And you can see on this one, I made little starter collets to get into the round tube, because I'm going to have a bend coming off this. And the bends, believe it or not, are actually a slightly smaller outer diameter than the tubing here. Here it is, guys. I just have one little piece of the puzzle left. Other than that, everything is tacked up and looking pretty fresh. So like I said, now it's time to go along and figure out where I can cut these so I can pull each section out and then weld them individually. So my plan is to be able to pop one of these whole tubes out, weld it all up, snake it back in, and hopefully it all fits again. So hopefully it should, and it's not going to move around too much on me, given the thickness of the material and whatnot. So coming up with a strategy here, I have one of my runners welded up, and everything else is heavily tacked. By tacked, I mean, kind of stitch welded in all the areas I could get. Now I'm trying to decide how I can weld all this. I think the answer is probably cut the tacks on one side, and then what I'll do is kind of like unsnake this through here and weld all of it up, and then leave this one connected and weld this one, if that makes any sense at all. The idea is essentially not to weld yourself into a corner, and that's what I'm trying to avoid. So we just gotta think about this a little bit, but it's gonna go fine. The welds are coming out nice too. Welding fixed stainless is fun. It's a super easy weld and it looks nice. Halfway done. So we have all this tube here welded up, this tube here. We have both these tubes welded up. And now, tomorrow, we're gonna go and get that one fitted. And that one finally fitted. And that's gonna be it. So it just takes a little tweaking, because when you do weld them, no matter what, they do move a little bit. So I've actually been using a hose clamp. So you kind of get a hose clamp in here if you need to pull them together. You can do that, and then a ratchet strap. And like I said, it's not much, maybe 1/8 of an inch. They kind of get out of sorts here. So yeah, that's just pretty much the nature of the beast. But all right, guys. So I got the motor back in the car. Manifold's done. Just checking the final fitment here, and it's freaking nasty. So I'm gonna pop the exhaust housing off, put the turbo back together and get it all on. But guys, this thing came out sick. So pretty solid looking setup, pretty fired up. So with this expansion tank here, I might actually get rid of it. It's gonna get pretty hot, you know, on that side with the exhaust. I don't want to risk melting it or anything like that. Plus, they're actually notoriously not great expansion tanks. So I might make an aluminum one and just put it on this side and keep all of our cooling on this side of the motor, because this side doesn't have any cooling from the factory. So, you know, if we can relocate this cooling line, get rid of this tank, we'll free up a ton of room on this side, plus we'll transfer some more weight to this side to kind of balance the motor out. So just kind of a thought, but we'll see how it goes. All right, guys, so we have our manifold pretty much done, just doing a final porting job. All right, guys, now that the manifold is bolted on the car and turbo is bolted on, it's now time to think about our wastegate placement. So I wanted to get the motor back in the car to do that. So in this, we're going to run 2 precision 46mm wastegates, and you have to run 2 gates because it's divided housing. So if you ran one into both, you know, of the manifold, it really wouldn't be a divided housing, now would it? So now we have to look at placement. Now I kind of already have it figured out, and we're just making sure everything's going to clear. So one of them is going to sit right here on this side of the divided housing, and the other one is going to sit. Let's see if I can even get it up in here. The other one is going to sit right on this side of the housing. So they're pretty much just going to be a T off either side of the, on each side of the divided housing. And it looks like I'll have enough room to clear everything. And what I think we'll do is we have plenty of room back here. So the exhaust from the gate tubes or the dump tubes will come, they'll tee into each other and then come out this way. So the gates are obviously divided, then we're gonna take that and run that tube into, well, I'll probably wind up running it into the exhaust here. So I'll just have the gates dump into our 3-inch exhaust that's going to be coming out here. I'll show you. So I did want to show you guys too that I ported the each runner as well. I do need to go in and do just a little touch up. You can see there's just a little booger there, and just kind of clean up some small spots. But each one of these is ported. The flange was slightly larger than the diameter of the tube, and this flange is considerably larger than the head. So I can actually port match the head now to match this, and this tapers down just slightly into each tube here. So that's just something I added that I wanted to show you guys. One thing to note that I want to show you guys that I messed up on my cart is that you have to put the clamps on also when doing this, and make sure you can take the clamps on and off. In this case, we're pretty tight on this side here from our compressor housing to the runner tube here. So we're gonna want this positioned in a way where we can get this clamp off. On my cart, I put it on and everything was good, and then I went to go pull the clamp off and it hit, so I could barely, like, I'd have to pry it and do all sorts of stuff to get the V-band out of the clamp. So just a note to make sure you have plenty of room, and when everything's tacked together, make sure you can unclamp all the clamps and everything, because, you know, it doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but these clamps actually do take up quite a bit of space once you're working in a confined space like this. So I got this funky little piece fabbed up, and this fits right in here. Now it's a little close. It hits there and it hits there, so we're gonna just split the difference and have it land right there. Not thrilled with it being as close to the turbine housing or the compressor housing as it is, but I think it will be just fine. So this is a funky little piece we have. Still need to bevel it and stuff, but it just sits right there, and then we'll cut a hole and we'll make a matching one on this side. So just to keep symmetry going, this will be mirrored, so this one will turn down. And to make this funky piece here, it's like, you know, obviously super weird and wonky. I used our cardboard tube trick. So I just took that a paper towel roll, cut it, taped it, made it tight around a tube, and then that we were able to just, you know, cut with scissors and get our nice little notch here. And then we just take this, slides off here. We just sleeve it around the piece that we're working with, and that's that. Got the gates tacked up. We're just gonna do one final test fitment on the car. But this setup's getting pretty sick nasty, guys. I'm digging it. I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but I can guarantee we are not going to have boost creep issues on this setup. Two 46mm wastegates controlling 2 cylinders each. Solid setup. Solid setup for sure. There it is, guys. Bam! Finished product. So at this point, my intercoolers are actually supposed to come in today. So the next step is going to be to do the intercoolers on this car. And then we will work our way to the intake, fuel system, electrical, get this thing fired up. So this was probably the longest part for fabrication wise. Probably took me like 4 or 5 days to get this manifold and everything all built and fabricated and fitted and all that fun stuff. So it was a little time consuming, not 4 like 8-hour days, but you know, 4 half days. But yeah, so I gotta get the car lowered now and rolled out to do some customers work, and then we're gonna start the intercooler job. But thank you so much, guys, for watching. We'll tackle the intercooler on the next one.